What follows is a brief construction montage.
Flashback. End of flashback. Soon after montage.
Yesterday, meanwhile, back in lowlands. A few moments later, more moments later, the next day.
The next day.
48 hours later, 2 days later, 72 hours later, several days later, 3 days later, 3 days later, 3 days later, 3 days later,
4 to 6 days later. 4 to 6 more days later.
1 week later, 1 week later,
2 weeks later.
3 weeks later, 3 weeks later, 4 to 6 weeks later, 6 months later, 6 months later, several months later, many months later,
70 years later.
75 years later, 2,000 years later, 3,000 years later, 1 eternity later.
The next morning.
The next morning,
The next morning. The very next evening. 1 weekend of pampering later.
the following Thursday, day 2, day 3, day 4,
1 semester later. 8 semesters later.